The morning sun filtered through the white curtains of their suburban Denver home, casting golden rays across the hardwood floors that Lisa had meticulously chosen 3 years ago. She stretched in bed, reaching across to where David should have been, but her hand met cold sheets instead. The digital clock glowed 7:23 a.m., unusual for a Saturday. David was religious about his weekend sleep-ins, often joking that Sunday mornings were made for mimosas and staying in bed until noon. "David," Lisa called out, her voice carrying through the 2-story colonial that had become their sanctuary. Silence answered back, broken only by the gentle hum of the central air conditioning and the distant sound of their neighbor's lawnmower, already at work. She padded downstairs in her silk pajamas, the ones David had bought her for their second anniversary, expecting to find him in the kitchen making his famous blueberry pancakes. Instead, she found a note propped against the coffee maker, a hastily scrawled message on the back of a utility bill that would change everything. "Lisa, I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Don't try to find me. D." Her hands trembled as she read the words again, then a third time, as if repetition might change their meaning. The handwriting was unmistakably David's, the same careful script that had written, "I love you" in birthday cards and signed mortgage documents. But these words felt foreign, impossible. She rushed to the garage, her bare feet slapping against the cold concrete. Empty. Her white Honda Civic, the car she'd bought with her own money before they'd even met, was gone. In its place sat a dark oil stain and the faint smell of rubber. "This has to be a mistake," she whispered, her voice echoing in the empty garage. Maybe he just went for a drive. Maybe he needed space. But even as she spoke the words, a creeping dread began to settle in her chest. She ran back inside, grabbing her phone from the nightstand. David's number went straight to voicemail. That cheerful message they'd recorded together last Christmas, with jazz music playing in the background and both their voices saying, "You've reached David and Lisa Martinez. We can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and we'll get back to you." Now, hearing their combined voices felt like a cruel joke. She tried calling again and again, each time the same voicemail. Each time her heart sank deeper. The first real shock came when she opened her laptop and logged into their joint checking account. The screen loaded slowly, and for a moment she held her breath. Then the numbers appeared, $127.43. Their savings account showed $0. Their emergency fund, the money they'd been carefully building for a down payment on a bigger house, gone. No, Lisa muttered, refreshing the page frantically. But the numbers remained unchanged. $43,000 vanished overnight. She called the bank, her fingers shaking as she dialed. The automated system asked for her account number, then her social security number, then transferred her to a customer service representative who spoke in practiced, sympathetic tones. "Mrs. Martinez, I can see there were several large withdrawals and transfers made yesterday evening between 11:47 p.m. and 12:23 a.m. All transactions were authorized with the correct PIN and account information. But I didn't authorize anything. I was asleep. I understand your concern, ma'am. However, since this is a joint account, both account holders have equal access to all funds. If you believe there's been unauthorized activity, you'll need to file a police report." And Lisa hung up, her hands shaking with rage and disbelief. Joint account, equal access. The words that had once symbolized their partnership now felt like a trap she'd walked into blindfolded. She stumbled to the bedroom, hoping to find some clue, some explanation. That's when she noticed the jewelry box on her dresser was open. Her grandmother's pearl necklace was still there, along with the diamond earrings David had given her for their anniversary, but the small velvet slot where her wedding ring had rested every night for the past 3 years was empty. Lisa sank to her knees beside the bed, the weight of realization crashing over her. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or a mental breakdown. This was calculated, planned. David had waited until she was asleep, then systematically taken everything, her car, their money, even the symbol of their marriage. She crawled under the covers, pulling them over her head like a child hiding from monsters. But these monsters were real, and they had her husband's face. The next few hours passed in a blur of tears and phone calls. Her sister Maya drove over from Aurora, bringing Chinese takeout and a bottle of wine that Lisa couldn't stomach. Her best friend Jennifer canceled her Saturday plans to sit with Lisa on the couch, holding her hand while she called David's workplace. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Martinez," his manager at the consulting firm said, his voice carefully neutral. David submitted his resignation yesterday afternoon. He said it was effective immediately due to personal reasons. "Did he say anything else? Give any indication of where he might be going?" "I'm afraid I can't discuss personnel matters beyond what I've already told you. I'm truly sorry." Each phone call revealed another layer of David's methodical planning. He'd closed his work email account, canceled his gym membership, and even called their internet provider to have the service transferred to Lisa's name only. It was as if he'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, carefully severing every tie that bound him to their life together. "We need to call the police," Maya said, her dark eyes flashing with anger. She'd never fully trusted David, always saying there was something too polished about him, too perfect. "This is theft. He can't just take your car and disappear." "It's not theft if we're married," Lisa said numbly. "The car was in both our names. The accounts were joint. Legally, he had every right to take it all. What about the wedding ring?" Lisa touched her bare finger, the pale band of skin where her ring had been looking foreign and exposed. "It was a gift. Technically it belonged to me, but proving that to the police, ... What's the point? He's already gone." That evening, after Maya had reluctantly gone home and Jennifer had extracted promises that Lisa would call if she needed anything, Lisa sat alone in her living room. The house felt enormous and hollow, every creak and settle magnified in the silence. She found herself staring at their wedding photo on the mantel, David in his charcoal gray suit, her in her grandmother's vintage dress, both of them beaming with what she'd thought was genuine joy. She walked over and picked up the frame, studying David's face for any sign of the man who could do this to her. His smile looked the same as always, warm, genuine, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. But now she wondered if she'd ever really known him at all. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know this is hard, but please don't try to find me. We both deserve better than this." The casual cruelty of the message, the implication that their marriage had been some kind of burden he'd finally escaped, ignited something dangerous in Lisa's chest. She'd been David's devoted wife for 3 years, had supported his career moves, had put her own dreams on hold when he'd wanted to relocate to Denver. She'd been planning their future while he'd been planning his exit. She typed back, "You coward. You could have at least had the decency to tell me to my face." The message showed as delivered but never read. When she tried to call the number, it went straight to a generic voicemail. Another dead end. That night, Lisa lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing despite her exhaustion. The betrayal was devastating, but underneath the hurt, something else was beginning to stir. A cold, calculating anger that whispered, dangerous thoughts. David thought he'd been clever, covering his tracks and disappearing without a trace, but he'd underestimated her. In 3 years of marriage, she'd learned his habits, his patterns, his weaknesses. She knew his social security number, his mother's maiden name, his favorite passwords. She knew the names of his college friends, his ex-girlfriends, his professional contacts. Most importantly, she knew his pride. David Martinez was vain about his reputation, obsessed with how others perceived him. He'd spent years crafting an image of the perfect husband, the successful businessman, the reliable friend. That image was his most prized possession, and Lisa was about to destroy it. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that Denver was famous for, but Lisa barely noticed as she sat in her home office, surrounded by stacks of paperwork and her laptop humming with activity. Of grief and rage, but now, 72 hours after David's disappearance, the fog was lifting to reveal something sharper underneath. She'd already filed a police report, though the officer had been politely dismissive. "Happens more than you'd think, ma'am. Adults have the right to leave, even if they take joint assets with them. It's a civil matter now. You'll need to talk to a divorce attorney." The divorce attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Chen, had been more helpful but equally discouraging. "Colorado is a no-fault state, Mrs. Martinez. Even if we can prove he planned this, the courts won't care about his methodology, just the asset division. We can fight for your car and half the savings, but it'll take months, maybe years." But Lisa wasn't interested in what the courts could do. She was interested in what she could do. She started with the obvious places. David's social media accounts. His Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn were all still active, but nothing had been posted since the Thursday before he left. She scrolled through months of photos, David at company events, David and Lisa at restaurants, David on their anniversary trip to Vail. In every image, he looked happy, devoted, the picture of a man deeply in love with his wife. "You should have won an Oscar," she muttered, screenshotting several photos that showed off his expensive watch and designer clothes that their joint income shouldn't have been able to afford. Next, she pulled up their credit card statements. 3 cards, all joint accounts, all with recent activity that made her blood run cold. Charges at expensive restaurants on dates when he'd claimed to be working late. A hotel room in Boulder the same weekend he'd told her he was visiting. His sick aunt in Colorado Springs. Multiple charges at a jewelry store she'd never heard of. including one for $2,847 just 2 weeks ago. Lisa's hands trembled as she scrolled through the evidence of David's double life. The jewelry store charge was particularly galling. He'd been buying gifts for someone else while telling Lisa they needed to budget more carefully. She picked up her phone and called the jewelry store. "My husband bought something there a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to make sure it was shipped to the right address." The salesperson was helpful, clearly assuming Lisa was David's wife, which, technically, she still was. "Oh yes, Mr. Martinez. The tennis bracelet for his beautiful Alina, he was so sweet. Said it was for their 6th-month anniversary. We shipped it to the address he provided in Boulder." Alina Lisa wrote the name down with a hand that had gone completely steady, and the address? "I'm sorry, I can't give out customer information over the phone, but I can tell you it was delivered." Successfully last Tuesday, Lisa hung up and immediately opened a new browser window. Alina plus Boulder plus David Martinez. The search results were sparse, but social media had a way of connecting dots that people didn't realize they'd left scattered. It took her 2 hours and a deep dive into Facebook's mutual friends feature, but she found her. Alina Rodriguez, 20 years old, a marketing coordinator at a tech startup in Boulder. Her Instagram was public, and it was a goldmine. Photo after photo showed Alina with a man whose face was carefully kept out of frame, just his hands, his torso, the back of his head. But Lisa recognized David's watch in one photo, his distinctive scar on his left hand in another. Most damning of all was a photo from 3 weeks ago. Alina wearing a tennis bracelet that matched the jewelry store charge exactly. 6 months? David had been having an affair for 6 months, while Lisa had been planning their future. She screenshotted everything, creating a folder on her desktop labeled Evidence. But she was just getting started. The next step was David's email. She knew his password. They'd always shared everything, or so she'd thought. He used the same password for everything. Broncos, 2019. The year his favorite team had had their best season in recent memory. His Gmail revealed a treasure trove of deception. Emails to Alina that were sickeningly romantic, full of promises about their future together. Messages to a real estate agent in Austin, Texas, about viewing apartments. Confirmation emails for a new bank account, a private account that Lisa had never known existed. But the most damning discovery was a thread with his friend Marcus, who apparently had been helping David plan his escape. "You sure about this, man?" Marcus had written, "Lisa's a good woman. This is pretty cold. Alina makes me feel alive again. Lisa will be fine. She's stronger than she knows. This is better for everyone in the long run." Lisa stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. The casual dismissal of their marriage, the arrogant assumption that he knew what was best for her, the complete lack of remorse or recognition of the devastation he was causing. She picked up her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the second ring, his voice cautious. "Lisa, I heard what happened. I'm so sorry." "You knew?" she said, her voice deadly calm. "You knew he was planning this." Silence stretched between them. Then, "Lisa, I tried to talk him out of it. I told him he was making a mistake, that he should talk to you. Maybe try counseling." "Where is he, Marcus?" "I can't tell you that. I'm sorry, but I can't. Can't or won't." "Lisa, please, just ... let him go. You deserve better than this." She hung up. Another door slammed shut, but she was learning that David's carefully planned escape had more holes than he'd realized. Her next call was to David's workplace. His manager had been polite but unhelpful on Saturday, but Lisa had done her research since then. She called the main number and asked to be transferred to HR. "This is Lisa Martinez," she said when a woman answered. "I need to speak to someone. About my husband David's resignation and final paycheck?" "Of course, Mrs. Martinez. I'm Sarah in Human Resources. I have David's file here. His final paycheck was direct deposited on Friday to his personal account, the one ending in 7,843. Blood turned to ice. Personal account? All of his paychecks were supposed to go to our joint account." "I'm sorry. There seems to be some confusion. Mr. Martinez changed his direct deposit information 6 months ago. I have the paperwork right here, signed and dated. 6 months. The same timeline as his affair with Alina. David had been redirecting his income while Lisa had been managing their household expenses from their joint account. Wondering why money seemed tighter than it should be? "Can you tell me the routing number for that account?" "I'm sorry, I can't provide that information. But if you'd like to speak to your husband about it, I can have him call you back." "That won't be necessary," Lisa said, her voice hollow. "Thank you for your time." She hung up and added another note to her growing file. Wage theft, 6 months of stolen income. The picture was becoming clearer. David hadn't just decided to leave his wife. He'd been planning it for half a year, systematically. stealing money, building a new life with his mistress, all while pretending to be the devoted husband. The level of calculation was breathtaking. But Lisa was calculating too. She opened a new document and began typing. By Wednesday, she had compiled a comprehensive dossier on David's deception. Bank records, credit card statements, screenshots of his romantic emails to Elena, documentation of his wage theft, even a timeline of his lies, cross-referenced with his actual whereabouts. She had enough evidence to paint a picture of a man who was not just an adulterer, but a systematic fraud. The question now was what to do with it all. Her first instinct was to post everything on social media, to blast David's reputation to smithereens in one spectacular explosion, but something told her that would be too easy, too quick. David had spent 6 months carefully dismantling her life. She was going to take her time dismantling his. She started with a simple Facebook post. Thank you too, everyone who has reached out since David's sudden departure. I'm processing this difficult time and discovering that our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. I appreciate your support and patience as I work through this. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Friends and family members who had seen David as the perfect husband were shocked and supportive. But more importantly, the post established a narrative. Lisa wasn't just a woman abandoned by her husband, she was a woman who was discovering things about her marriage. It planted seeds of curiosity without making explicit accusations within hours. She had dozens of comments expressing support and several private messages from people asking for more details. Lisa responded to each one carefully, sharing just enough to keep people interested without revealing her hand. The real breakthrough came Thursday evening. Lisa was scrolling through Elena's Instagram when she noticed something that made her heart race. Elena had posted a photo of herself at a coffee shop in Austin, Texas, with the caption, "New city, new adventures, #moving day, #fresh start." Austin, the same city David had been researching apartments for. They'd moved together. Lisa immediately searched for apartments in Austin with the name Martinez. It took several tries and a small fee to a public records search site, but she found it. A lease application for a one-bedroom apartment in downtown Austin, signed by David Martinez and Elena Rodriguez as domestic partners. The lease start date was October 1st, last Tuesday. Just 4 days after David had disappeared from Denver, Lisa leaned back in her chair, a slow smile spreading across her face. David thought he'd been so clever covering his tracks and disappearing without a trace. But he'd underestimated the digital age, and more importantly, he'd underestimated his wife. She picked up her phone and called the apartment complex in Austin. "Hi, I'm calling about the Martinez-Rodriguez lease that just started. I'm David's wife, and I need to verify some information for our insurance." The leasing agent was friendly and unsuspecting. Of course, Mr. Martinez was so nice when he toured the apartment. He mentioned he was relocating for work. "Is there a problem with the lease?" "No problem at all. I just need to confirm the address for our records." Lisa carefully wrote down the address, the apartment number, even the name of the complex. David's new life laid out in black and white that night. She sat in her home office surrounded by evidence of David's betrayal and began to plan her next move. She had his location, his girlfriend's identity, documentation of his theft, and deception. The question was how to use it all most effectively. David had taken her car, her savings, and her wedding ring. Now she was going to take something far more valuable to him, his reputation, but she was going to do it slowly, methodically. The same way he had destroyed her life. The hunt was about to begin. Lisa's campaign against David's reputation began like a whisper in a quiet room, barely noticeable at first, but impossible to ignore once you became aware of it. She had learned patience from David himself, watching how he'd methodically planned his escape for 6 months. Now she would apply that same calculated approach to his destruction. Her first move was subtle. She updated her LinkedIn profile, changing her status to navigating life transitions and discovering new strength. Professional but vague, it invited questions without providing answers. Within days, her inbox was flooded with messages from colleagues, former classmates, and professional contacts expressing support and curiosity to each one. Lisa responded with carefully crafted messages that revealed just enough to be tantalizing. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm going through a difficult divorce right now. David left very suddenly, and I'm discovering that our marriage wasn't what I thought it was. I'm focusing on rebuilding and moving forward." The beauty of this approach was that it let other people's imaginations do the work. Lisa never had to make accusations or seem vindictive. She simply presented herself as a woman wronged, processing difficult truths about her marriage. The recipients of her messages drew their own conclusions and, inevitably, shared them with others. Within 2 weeks, David's professional network was buzzing with speculation. What had happened to the Martinez marriage? What had David done? The questions spread like ripples on a pond, each conversation adding another layer to the growing narrative. But Lisa's masterstroke was her approach to David's family. She'd always had a good relationship with his parents, Maria and Roberto Martinez, who lived in Phoenix. They'd been shocked by David's sudden departure and had tried calling him repeatedly without success. When Lisa called them, her voice carefully modulated to convey hurt rather than anger. They were eager to help. "Mia, we don't understand what happened," Maria said, her accent thick with emotion. "David won't answer our calls. He sent a text saying he's fine and needs space. But this isn't like him. We raised him better than this." "I know you did, Maria. I'm trying to understand it myself. I've been discovering some things about David that I never knew. I think he's been struggling with some issues for a while." Lisa didn't elaborate, but she didn't need to. The implication was clear. David had secrets, problems that even his wife hadn't known about. She could practically hear Maria's mind working, filling in the blanks with increasingly dark possibilities. "What kind of issues?" Roberto asked, his voice tight with concern. "I don't want to burden you with details while you're already worried about him, but I'm hoping that once he's ready to talk, he'll explain everything to all of us." It was a perfect response. Lisa sounded protective of David's parents while simultaneously planting seeds of doubt about their son. She came across as the caring daughter-in-law trying to shield them from painful truths, while they were left to imagine what those truths might be. The call ended with Maria and Roberto promising to stay in touch and expressing their support for Lisa. Within days, Lisa knew they would be calling David's siblings, his cousins, his childhood friends, all asking the same question: what was wrong with David? Meanwhile, Lisa was working on a different front entirely. She'd tracked down David's college girlfriend, Sarah, who was now married and living in Seattle. A casual Facebook message expressing sympathy for Sarah's recent job loss discovered through mutual friends led to a phone conversation that proved illuminating. David always was good at compartmentalizing, Sarah said after Lisa had skillfully steered the conversation toward relationships and trust. "When we were together, I sometimes felt like I was dating a performance rather than a person. Everything was so carefully managed, so controlled." "What do you mean?" "Oh, you know David. He always had to be the perfect boyfriend, the perfect student, the perfect everything. I used to joke that he probably practiced his spontaneous moments in the mirror. Don't get me wrong, he was sweet and attentive, but sometimes I wondered if he actually felt anything real, or if he was just very good at knowing what people wanted to hear." Lisa filed this information away. It painted David as manipulative and calculating, someone who had always struggled with authenticity. When Sarah inevitably shared this conversation with others, it would add another layer to the growing narrative about David's character. But Lisa's most effective weapon was her own behavior. She began accepting invitations to social events she'd previously avoided: work parties, neighborhood gatherings, her book club. At each event, she presented herself as a woman who was healing, growing stronger, and discovering her own worth. She never badmouthed David directly, but she didn't hide her pain either. "I'm learning that sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us deepest," she told her book club when they asked how she was doing. "David's departure was devastating, but I'm discovering strength I didn't know I had. I'm also learning that our marriage wasn't as solid as I believed." The women in her book club were influential in their community. Teachers, real estate agents, small business owners. They had wide social networks and long memories. Lisa's quiet dignity in the face of David's abandonment made her a sympathetic figure, while David's absence and silence made him look callous and cowardly. 3 weeks after David's departure, Lisa received a friend request on Facebook from Jennifer Walsh, a woman she didn't recognize. Jennifer's profile showed her as a dental hygienist in Boulder, with several mutual friends from Denver's social scene. Lisa accepted the request and was immediately hit with a private message. "Hi Lisa, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I heard about your situation through mutual friends and I wanted you to know that you're not alone. I think my husband might be having an affair with the same woman yours was involved with. Can we talk?" Lisa's pulse quickened. Jennifer had discovered Alina too. This was an unexpected gift, but one that needed to be handled carefully. They met at a coffee shop in downtown Denver, and Jennifer's story was heartbreaking. She'd been married to Tom Walsh for 8 years, had 2 young children, and had recently discovered that Tom was having an affair with a woman named Alina Rodriguez. She'd hired a private investigator and had photos of Tom and Alina together, including several that showed them with David. "I think they've been friends for a while," Jennifer said, sliding a manila folder across the table. "My investigator thinks your husband might have introduced them." Lisa opened the folder and saw photos that made her stomach clench. David and Alina at restaurants, holding hands. David and Alina with Tom and Jennifer's husband, all of them laughing together. David and Alina at the jewelry store where he'd bought her the tennis bracelet. But the most damning photo was from a hotel in Vail, the same hotel where David had claimed to be on a business trip just 2 months ago. The photo showed David and Alina entering a room together, their body language leaving no doubt about their relationship. "I'm filing for divorce," Jennifer said, her voice shaking. "I'm going to take Tom for everything he's worth. But I thought, you should know that your husband was involved with Alina long before he left you. This wasn't a sudden decision, it was a long-term affair." Lisa thanked Jennifer and promised to stay in touch. As she drove home, her mind was racing. The photos provided concrete evidence of David's timeline of deception. But more importantly, they showed that David's affair had damaged another family. Jennifer's children would grow up in a broken home because of David's selfishness that night. Lisa made a decision that would escalate her campaign to a new level. She created a blog. The blog was titled Rebuilding After Betrayal. One Woman's Journey and was hosted on a platform that allowed anonymous posting. Lisa was careful to never mention David by name, but she wrote about her experience with devastating honesty. Her first post was titled, "The Night My Husband Stole My Life." She wrote about waking up to find David gone, about discovering the empty bank accounts and missing wedding ring, about the methodical way he had dismantled their life together. She wrote about the pain of betrayal, the shock of discovering lies, and the slow process of rebuilding her identity. The post was beautifully written, emotionally raw and completely authentic. Lisa had always been a good writer, but pain had sharpened her prose into something powerful and compelling. She shared the link on her Facebook page with a simple message. "I started writing about my experience to help process my feelings. If anyone else is going through something similar, maybe this will help." The response was immediate and overwhelming. The post was shared dozens of times within hours, commented on by friends and strangers alike. Women shared their own stories of betrayal, men expressed outrage at her husband's behavior, and everyone wanted to know more details. Lisa's second post, published 3 days later, was titled The Other Woman, When Your Husband's Affair Destroys Multiple Families. She wrote about discovering Alina, about the other wives who had been affected, about the ripple effects of adultery that extended far beyond the original marriage. Again, she was careful to never mention names, but anyone who knew David would recognize the story. And increasingly, people in their social circle were starting to piece together the details. The blog posts were being shared in Denver social media groups, forwarded through email chains, and discussed at dinner parties. Lisa had become a local symbol of dignity in the face of betrayal. While David's reputation was being systematically destroyed by his own actions, but Lisa's most effective strategy was her restraint. She never attacked David directly, never made accusations she couldn't prove, never seemed vindictive or unhinged. She simply told her story with quiet dignity and let others draw their own conclusions. When people asked her directly about David, she would say things like, "I'm focusing on my own healing right now," or "I'm sure David has his own perspective on what happened." She came across as classy and mature, which made David's abandonment seem even more callous by comparison. 6 weeks after David's departure, Lisa's campaign was bearing fruit. His professional reputation was in tatters. Several former colleagues had reached out to express their shock and support for Lisa. His family was asking increasingly pointed questions about his behavior and mental health. His high school and college friends were sharing stories about David's past relationships that painted him as manipulative and self-centered. Most importantly, David's carefully curated image as the perfect husband and reliable friend was crumbling. People were starting to see him as a fraud, someone who had been living a lie for years. Lisa's phone rang late one Thursday evening. She didn't recognize the number, but something made her answer. "Lisa, this is ... This is David." His voice was strained, tired. "Hello, David, I need you to stop." "Stop, what?" "You know what? The blog posts, the social media, whatever you're doing. People are calling me, asking questions. My boss in Austin is asking questions. My parents won't stop calling." Lisa smiled, a cold expression that David couldn't see. "I'm not doing anything to you, David. I'm simply processing my own experience and sharing it with people who care about me." "Lisa, please. I know you're angry, but this isn't fair. You're destroying my reputation. Your reputation. Your reputation?" Lisa's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "You mean the reputation you built on lies? The reputation of the devoted husband who was actually stealing from his wife and having an affair for 6 months? It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You took my car, my savings, my wedding ring, and my trust. You spent 6 months planning your escape while I was planning our future. You didn't just leave me, David. You robbed me. I never meant to hurt you, but you did. You hurt me. You hurt your family. You hurt Jennifer Walsh's children. You hurt everyone who believed in you. There was a long pause. Then, what do you want? I want you to understand that actions have consequences. You thought you could just disappear and start over with no accountability. But the truth has a way of catching up with people. Lisa, I'm begging you. I'll make this right. I'll pay back the money. You're not begging me, David. You're begging me to stop telling the truth, and I'm not going to do that. Lisa hung up, her hands shaking with adrenaline. David was scared. His new life was being threatened by the exposure of his old lies. But this was just the beginning. She had so much more planned. The call from David had been 3 weeks ago, and Lisa could tell her campaign was reaching a crescendo. Her blog now had over 50,000 subscribers, with new posts being shared across social media platforms and picked up by relationship advice websites. She'd been invited to speak at a local women's empowerment group about rebuilding after betrayal, and the local newspaper had contacted her about featuring her story in their lifestyle section. But the most satisfying development was the steady stream of information flowing back to her from David's former friends and colleagues. People were reaching out to share stories about David's behavior, patterns of deception that went back years. Lisa was learning that she hadn't been David's first victim. Just his most recent. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Walsh. Tom's lawyer called. They want to settle out of court. Tom's terrified about the custody hearing. Thank you for everything you've done. Lisa smiled. Jennifer's divorce proceedings were going smoothly, partly because Tom's affair with Alina had been so thoroughly documented through Lisa's investigation. The photos and timeline Lisa had uncovered were providing Jennifer with exactly the leverage she needed to protect her children and secure a favorable settlement. But Lisa's masterpiece was still to come. She'd been working with a lawyer named Michael Chen, Patricia's younger brother, who specialized in asset recovery and fraud cases. Michael had been analyzing David's financial records, tracking the money he'd stolen and the assets he'd hidden. What they'd discovered was even more damaging than Lisa had imagined. Your husband has been systematically defrauding you for over a year, Michael explained during their meeting in his downtown office. The redirected paychecks, the hidden accounts, the credit cards you didn't know about. It all adds up to about $87,000 in stolen assets. Lisa felt a cold satisfaction. Can we get it back? Most of it, yes, but more. Importantly, we can file criminal charges. What David did isn't just adultery, it's fraud, theft, and financial abuse. These are felonies. I want to file charges. Michael nodded. I thought you might. But Lisa, you should know that once we go down this path, it's going to get very public. Criminal charges mean court records, possibly media attention. David's new life in Austin is going to be completely exposed. Good. The criminal complaint was filed on a Tuesday morning in November. By that afternoon, the story had exploded across social media. Lisa's blog post about it, titled, "When Betrayal Becomes Criminal, My Husband's Fraud Exposed," went viral, being shared over 10,000 times in the first 12 hours. The post detailed everything. David's systematic theft of their joint assets, his creation of secret accounts, his diversion of income, and the calculated way he'd planned his disappearance. Lisa had included screenshots of bank statements, email exchanges, and court documents. She'd painted a picture of a man who wasn't just an unfaithful husband, but a criminal who had spent months robbing his wife while she slept beside him. For anyone who thinks this is just about a messy divorce, Lisa wrote, let me be clear. My husband didn't just break his marriage vows. He broke the law. He stole nearly $90,000 from our joint accounts, redirected his paychecks without my knowledge, and used our credit cards to fund his affair. This isn't heartbreak, it's felony theft. The response was unprecedented. Lisa's inbox flooded with messages from women sharing their own stories of financial abuse. Several journalists requested interviews. A true crime podcast reached out about featuring her story. Most importantly, the post was being shared in professional networks across Denver and Austin, ensuring that David's colleagues, clients, and business contacts would see exactly what kind of man they were dealing with within 48 hours. Lisa received a call that made her weak. It was David's boss in Austin, a woman named Rebecca Torres, who'd found Lisa's contact information through LinkedIn. Ms. Martinez, I'm calling because I need to verify some information about your husband. Our company is conducting a background investigation following some concerning allegations that have come to our attention. Lisa's pulse quickened. What kind of allegations? I can't share specifics, but I can tell you that someone sent our HR department links to your blog posts and copies of the criminal complaint. We take financial crimes very seriously, especially when they involve employees who handle client accounts. David was a financial consultant. His job required him to manage other people's money, to be trusted with sensitive financial information. The irony was perfect. A man who couldn't be trusted with his own wife's money was being paid to manage strangers' investments. I'd be Happy to verify anything you need, Lisa said. I have extensive documentation of David's fraudulent activities. That would be very helpful. Our legal department will be in touch. Lisa hung up, barely able to contain her satisfaction. David's new job, the foundation of his new life with Alina, was about to disappear. And unlike their marriage, this destruction would be entirely public and permanent. The next few days brought a cascade of consequences for David. Lisa tracked each development through her network of contacts and social media monitoring. First, David's consulting firm placed him on administrative leave pending their investigation. The news spread quickly through Austin's business community, where David had been trying to establish himself as a reliable financial advisor. Second, Alina's company apparently received anonymous tips about her relationship with a man under criminal investigation for financial fraud. Alina's Instagram posts became increasingly erratic, cryptic messages about fake friends and people who can't mind their own business. Third, and most damaging of all, someone forwarded Lisa's blog posts to David's new apartment complex. The lease agreement that Lisa had discovered included a morality clause standard in many upscale complexes that allowed for eviction based on criminal activity. David and Alina received a 30-day notice to vacate. Lisa discovered this last detail through Jennifer Walsh, whose private investigator was still monitoring the situation. Tom is trying to use David's legal troubles in our custody case, Jennifer explained during one of their regular coffee meetings. His lawyer is arguing that Tom was led astray by a bad influence. It's pathetic, but it might actually work in my favor. But the most satisfying moment came when Lisa received a certified letter from David's lawyer, not asking her to stop her campaign, but offering a settlement. David wanted to pay back every penny he'd stolen, plus interest and damages, in exchange for Lisa agreeing to a public statement that their marriage had ended amicably. Lisa read the letter twice, then called Michael Chen. They're panicking, she told him. I'm not surprised. David's criminal trial is still pending, but his civil liability is already clear. He knows he's going to lose, so he's trying to limit the damage. What do you think I should do? Financially, the settlement offer is generous. You'd get back more than David stole and faster than we could recover it through criminal proceedings. But Lisa, you should know that accepting this deal means giving up your right to continue your public campaign. David's lawyer is requiring a non-disclosure agreement as part of the settlement. Lisa considered this. The money would be nice, but it had never really been about the money. It had been about accountability, about making sure David faced consequences. For his actions, I want a counteroffer, she said finally. I'll take the settlement, but I won't sign an NDA. David can pay for his crimes, but he doesn't get to buy my silence. The negotiations took 2 weeks. David's lawyer initially refused the counteroffer, but as David's situation in Austin continued to deteriorate, his position weakened. His consulting firm had fired him after completing their investigation. Alina had apparently moved out of their apartment and returned to Boulder, leaving David to face the lease violation alone. His new life was crumbling as spectacularly as he'd made Lisa's life crumble. Finally, David agreed to Lisa's terms. He would repay $94,000, the stolen money, plus interest and penalties. He would return Lisa's wedding ring, which Alina had apparently been wearing, a detail that had emerged during the asset investigation. And he would plead guilty to the criminal charges, accepting probation and community service. But Lisa would retain the right to continue telling her story. The settlement was finalized on a cold December morning. Lisa sat in Michael Chen's office, signing paperwork that would close this chapter of her life. The check for $94,000 felt symbolic, not just a repayment of stolen money, but a recognition that her pain had been real, her fight had been justified. So what now? Michael asked as they finished the paperwork. Are you planning to continue the blog? Lisa smiled. Actually, I'm planning to expand it. I've been contacted by a publisher who wants me to write a book about financial abuse in marriage, and I'm starting a nonprofit to help other women who've been through similar situations. David's probably not going to like that. David doesn't get a vote anymore. That evening, in it, she detailed the settlement, the criminal conviction, and the complete collapse of David's attempts to rebuild his reputation. She wrote about the other women who had come forward with similar stories, the lawyers who had offered to take their cases, the support network that had grown around her campaign, but most importantly, she wrote about transformation 6 months ago. I woke up to find that my husband had stolen my car, my savings, and my wedding ring, she wrote. I thought my life was over. I thought I had lost everything that mattered. I was wrong. What I lost was a man who was never worthy of my trust. What I gained was something far more valuable: the knowledge of my own strength, the support of an incredible community, and the power that comes from refusing to be silently victimized. David thought he could take my life apart and disappear without consequences. He was wrong about that too. To anyone reading this who has been betrayed, stolen from, or abandoned, you are stronger than you know. Your pain is valid, your anger is justified, and your story deserves to be heard. Don't let anyone steal your voice along with everything, else. The post was shared over 50,000 times in the first week. Lisa received interview requests from national media outlets, speaking invitations from women's organizations across the country, and messages from hundreds of women thanking her for showing them that they didn't have to suffer in silence. 6 months later, Lisa's book Stolen: One Woman's Fight Against Financial Abuse was published by a major publishing house. It became a bestseller, sparked national conversations about economic abuse in marriage, and led to legislative changes in several states. Lisa's nonprofit, Voices Unsilenced, provided legal aid and support services to women facing financial abuse. The organization was funded partly by speaking fees from Lisa's increasingly popular lectures and partly by donations from women, whose own voices had been freed by Lisa's example. David, meanwhile, had moved back to Phoenix to live with his parents. While completing his community service, his reputation in the consulting industry was destroyed. His relationship with Alina was over and his family relationships remained strained. He'd tried to rebuild his career in a different field, but Lisa's story had become so well known that his name was practically Googleable infamy. The last Lisa heard, David was working at a car dealership, selling used cars under his middle name. It seemed fitting, somehow a man who had built his life on deception, now selling other people's discarded dreams. On the 1-year anniversary of David's disappearance, Lisa stood in the living room of her new house, a beautiful craftsman bungalow in Denver's Highland neighborhood that she'd bought with the settlement money and her book advance. The walls were decorated with photos from her speaking engagements, framed thank you letters from women she'd helped, and a copy of her book's dedication to every woman who has been told to stay silent. Your voice matters. Her wedding ring, finger bare for a year now, caught the morning light. She'd never replaced David's ring, and she never planned to. The pale band of skin had faded, but she liked what it represented now, not the absence of a marriage, but the presence of freedom. Lisa's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Walsh. Tom's final custody payment came through today. The kids and I are doing great. Thank you for showing me that I didn't have to accept what he did to us. Another message followed from a woman named Sandra in Tampa. Your book gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband. I'm filing charges next week. Thank you for lighting the way. And then a third from Maya. Proud of you, sis. Dinner tonight to celebrate the anniversary of your liberation. Lisa smiled, looking around her beautiful home filled with evidence of the life she'd built from the ashes of David's betrayal. He had taken her car, her savings, and her ring, thinking he could take her whole life with them instead. He had given her something far more valuable, the knowledge that she was unbreakable. She picked up her phone and typed back to Maya. Absolutely. I have so much to celebrate. The morning sun streamed through her windows, casting golden light across the hardwood floors that she had chosen. In the house that she had bought, in the life that she had built entirely on her own terms, David's betrayal, which had once seemed like the end of everything, had actually been the beginning of the most authentic, powerful, and purposeful chapter of her life. Lisa Martinez had discovered that when someone tries to steal your life, sometimes the best revenge is building a better one, and she was just getting started.